Okay, to get this hub on and off, the first thing you've got to do, get your wheel off, and before you take the brake caliper off, get someone to stand on the brake pedal and take the great big nut. Well, there's a big nut on there. It's a 30mm nut on this one. And you'll notice, before you take it off, count the number of threads that are exposed on the axle, and you can't really see it too well here, but in the 12 o'clock position on that nut, there's an imperfection you probably can see on the camera. That imperfection was a dimple that's beat into the nut right at this location, right in the keyway of the axle, and that sort of locked that nut on there. So it came that way from the factory. So I took a chisel like this and put it in that keyway like that and drove it in until I made that nut round again. And then I had someone stand on the brake pedal. Actually, I used an impact gun, so you don't need to worry about it if you have a big impact gun, but if you're using a strong bar, have somebody stand on the brake pedal and make sure when you're pulling this nut off with a, say, a 2 or 3 foot strong bar, that you're pushing down on the strong bar or up, I suppose, but you don't want to be pushing sort of forward or backward on the car because you could cause the car to roll off its jack stand. So anyway, get that nut off and take it on and off a few times to free up the threads, and then turn it backwards and put it back on about 3/4 of the way, and then you've got an area that you can pound on to beat that axle out of the hub. Now you don't want to do it too hard, and you also want to take a flat piece of metal to cover over that nut and just whack on the flat piece of metal to kind of distribute the load instead of just hitting on the side of the nut somewhere. So now you got that guy off, and you're going to have this freed up. Next thing you want to do is take these, or you could use a puller. Yeah, that's good too. If you have real trouble with it, that's what you're going to have to do. Next to these nuts to hold the shock onto the hub here, these are 19mm nuts and 19mm bolt. You come off pretty easy with an impact gun. There's 2 of those. You should take those off first, or at least the bottom one. Take it out, because once you take it out, then you're going to be able to then you'll be able to fit a 17mm socket with an extension on the back of your top caliper bolt. Without that lower shock bolt out, the bolt sticks out so far it won't let your socket or your impact gun get in there very well. So anyway, take those guys out of there, and then take your caliper bolts off, and got the caliper held up to the shock or the spring with a bungee cord, because you don't want to put all the strain on that brake line. Now that the caliper is off of the disc, you do not want to touch your brake pedal anymore, because if you do, you'll push the pistons out of the caliper. Don't ask me how I know. And then the bottom, my lighting's bad enough, I can't really show it, but the ball joint is in here, and there's a, what is that? Is that a 21? No, it's probably a, I think it's a 19mm. Yeah, right, there's a castle nut that holds the ball joint on. Castle nut looks like that because it has a little crown on the top of it, crown bumps. And it's got one of these kinds of cotter pins in there. They're reusable if you're careful when you take it out, so get that off. And then there's probably tons of YouTube videos on how to get a ball joint out of the hub. And then you have your outer tie rod end, and this one did not have a pin that came out easily. It was a cotter pin like this that broke, rusted and broke. So I drilled it out with a tiny drill, and I didn't actually drill the whole thing out. I tried to punch it out first, and it wouldn't punch out. So then I drilled a small hole right through it, and that took enough strain off it that I was able to easily punch it out then. Then I took this nut off. Then I put the nut on upside down, thread it on almost all the way, and then you can use a puller or pound it down. But you have to be careful if you use certain types of puller, like a pickle fork puller, because you'll damage the tie rod and the grease boot, and you don't want to do that. So once you get the ball joint and the tie rod end and the caliper off, and then these shock mounts, and this nut right here, the hub will just come off in your hand. Okay.